Tasha Williams stood on the corner of Eddy and Jones streets in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, her phone pressed to her ear as she called Metro Cab Company for the third time that month. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and she needed to get to her office in Soma for a 9:30 board meeting. The Tenderloin was San Francisco's most misunderstood neighborhood, often dismissed as dangerous or undesirable despite being home to a vibrant, diverse community. Tasha had chosen to live there deliberately, in a renovated loft building, because she believed in investing in overlooked communities, and because the location was convenient to downtown. Metro Cab Company, this is Greg speaking. How can I help you? The dispatcher's voice was brisk and professional. Hi, I need a cab from the corner of Eddy and Jones to 405 Howard Street, please. There was a pause. What's the pickup address again? Eddy and Jones, the Tenderloin. Another pause, longer this time. Tasha could hear the subtle shift in the dispatcher's tone when he spoke again. And this is going to Howard Street. What's at that address? My office, Tasha said, keeping her voice neutral despite the odd question. And you have cash to pay for the ride? Tasha felt her jaw tighten. I can pay with a credit card. Yeah, see, a lot of our drivers prefer cash for rides from that area. Tenderloin pickups can be, problematic. Problematic how? Look, ma'am, I'm just being straight with you. We've had issues with riders from certain neighborhoods, unpaid fares, altercations, that kind of thing. So unless you can guarantee cash payment up front, I'm not sure we have a cab available right now. Tasha took a breath, forcing herself to stay calm. I'm a regular customer. I've used Metro Cab dozens of times. I've never had an issue with payment. What's your name? Tasha Williams. She heard typing, then a dismissive snort. I don't see you in our frequent rider system, so I can't really verify that, because I usually book through your app, but the app wasn't working this morning, so I called directly. Well, without a verified account history, and given the pickup location, I'm going to have to say we don't have any cabs available right now. You might want to try one of those ride-share services. They're probably more appropriate for your needs. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Tasha understood exactly what was happening. She'd experienced it before, the assumption based on her address, probably her voice, and definitely her race, that she was somehow an undesirable customer. Let me speak to your supervisor, Tasha said, her voice still controlled but firm. I am the supervisor. I'm the head dispatcher, and I've made my decision. Have a good day. He hung up. Tasha stood on the corner, phone in hand, processing what had just happened. She wasn't just any customer being discriminated against. She was the owner of Metro Cab Company. 3 weeks ago, Tasha's venture capital firm, Williams Ventures, had acquired Metro Cab as part of a larger investment strategy in urban transportation. The acquisition had been handled quietly through attorneys and financial intermediaries. The company's existing management didn't know the new owner yet, as Tasha had planned to spend the first month observing operations anonymously before making her ownership public. She'd made dozens of test calls and rides in the past 3 weeks, evaluating service quality, driver professionalism, and dispatch efficiency. Most had been fine, but this was the third time she'd experienced what seemed like discrimination when calling from her Tenderloin address. Tasha pulled out her tablet and opened her encrypted files. She had recordings of all 3 calls, saved automatically through her business phone system. She had GPS data showing she'd been in the same location each time, and she had documentation of how the company treated requests from different neighborhoods. She called her chief operating officer, Marcus Chen. Marcus, I need you to set up an emergency meeting with Metro Cab's management team. Today, 2 p.m. Don't tell them why, just that it's urgent from the new ownership. Everything okay? I'll explain when I see you, but I need our attorneys there too, and pull the audio of all dispatch calls from the Tenderloin neighborhood for the past month. I want to analyze the pattern. Tasha ended up taking an Uber to her office, making detailed notes about her experience. When she arrived, she immediately pulled up Metro Cab's dispatch logs and customer complaint records. What she found was damning. Over the past 6 months, the company had received 47 complaints from customers in predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods. The complaints were remarkably consistent: long wait times, claims of no available cars, requests for cash-only payment, and in some cases outright refusals of service. Greg Thompson, the head dispatcher who'd just refused her service, was named in 32 of those complaints. Yet there was no record of any disciplinary action. The complaints had been filed, noted, and ignored. Tasha also discovered something else. Thompson had been manipulating the dispatch system. When calls came from certain zip codes, particularly those with higher percentages of residents of color, he would mark them as high risk in the system, which automatically sent them to the bottom of the dispatch queue. Drivers could see these designations and often chose to ignore these requests in favor of pickups from more affluent neighborhoods. The system Thompson had created wasn't just discriminatory, it was probably illegal, violating both civil rights laws and the company's taxi license requirements. At 2 p.m., Tasha walked into the conference room where Metrocab's management team was assembled. There were 5 people: Greg Thompson, the operations manager Linda Hayes, the fleet manager Robert Santos, the HR director Jennifer Park, and the company's longtime accountant Walter Cohen. They looked confused about why they'd been called to a meeting at Williams Ventures. They'd been told it was about the acquisition, but they'd expected to meet with lawyers or investment bankers, not the CEO herself. Tasha sat at the head of the table, flanked by Marcus Chen and their corporate attorney, Sarah Mitchell. She opened her laptop and connected it to the conference room screen. "Good afternoon, I'm Tasha Williams, CEO of Williams Ventures, and as of 3 weeks ago, the owner of Metrocab Company." The room went silent. Greg Thompson's face showed recognition, then confusion, then slow dawning horror. "Some of you may be wondering why I've called this meeting," Tasha continued. "Let me show you." She played the audio of her 3 phone calls to Metrocab, including the one from that morning. Greg's voice filled the conference room, asking for cash up front, claiming no cabs were available, suggesting she use a cheaper service. "This morning, I was refused service by my own company, not because there were no cabs available. I've checked the logs. There were 4 cabs within 3 blocks of my location. Not because I lacked payment. I have excellent credit and have always paid my fares. I was refused service because I was calling from the Tenderloin, and your head dispatcher made assumptions about the kind of customer I was." She turned to Greg, whose face had gone pale. "Mr. Thompson, would you like to explain your decision-making process this morning?" Greg stammered. I didn't know it was you. I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" Tasha's voice was sharp. "Show me where in company policy it says to refuse service to customers in certain neighborhoods. Show me where it says to demand cash up front based on zip code. Show me where it says to make assumptions about customers' ability to pay based on where they live." Greg had no answer. Tasha pulled up more data on the screen. Over the past 6 months, Metrocab has received 47 complaints about discriminatory service. "Mr. Thompson, you're named in 32 of them. 32 customers, predominantly people of color, who felt they were treated differently because of their race or address." She showed the dispatch logs. "I've also discovered that you've been systematically coding certain neighborhoods as high risk, which deprioritizes those pickup requests and discourages drivers from accepting them. Can you explain the criteria you used for determining which neighborhoods were high risk?" Greg looked around the table for support but found none. His colleagues were staring at the screen in shock, seeing the evidence of systematic discrimination for the first time. "It's just, some neighborhoods have more fare disputes, more problems. I was trying to protect our drivers from what?" Tasha interrupted. "From customers who happen to live in neighborhoods with more people of color, because that's what the data shows. Your high-risk designations correlate almost perfectly with neighborhood demographics, not with actual incident rates." She pulled up another chart. "I've analyzed actual fare disputes, customer complaints about drivers, and safety incidents by neighborhood. The Tenderloin, where you refused to send me a cab this morning, has a lower rate of fare disputes than Pacific Heights. The Mission has fewer driver safety incidents than the Financial District. Your risk assessments weren't based on data, they were based on bias." The operations manager, Linda Hayes, spoke up. "Tasha, Miss Williams, I want you to know that I wasn't aware of this. If I had known Greg was coding neighborhoods this way." "You should have known," Tasha said firmly. "You're the operations manager. Customer complaints cross your desk. The patterns were obvious to anyone who looked." She turned to Jennifer Park, the HR director. "And you, Miss Park, you received multiple complaints about discriminatory dispatch practices. What action did you take?" Jennifer looked uncomfortable. We documented them, but Greg has been with the company for 20 years. He's well regarded. Without clear evidence of discrimination. You had clear evidence. You had 32 complaints. You had customers telling you they were being treated unfairly. But you chose to protect a long-term employee rather than protect your customers and your company's legal compliance." Tasha stood up, her presence commanding the room. "Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Thompson, you're terminated effective immediately. Your systematic discrimination against customers and manipulation of the dispatch system is grounds for immediate dismissal." Greg started to protest, but Sarah Mitchell, the attorney, cut him off. You might want to consult with your own lawyer before saying anything else, Mr. Thompson. There are potential legal implications beyond just your employment termination. Tasha continued. Miss Hayes, you're being placed on probationary status. You'll undergo management training focused on oversight and accountability. If you can't demonstrate improved systems for monitoring service equity within 90 days, your employment will be terminated. She turned to Jennifer Park. Miss Park, HR's failure to address documented discrimination complaints is unacceptable. You're also on probationary status. We'll be bringing in an external consultant to review and revise all HR policies and complaint procedures. Tasha addressed the full room. Metro Cab Company is going to change. We're implementing new dispatch software that removes zip code visibility so drivers can't see where requests are coming from before accepting. We're establishing objective metrics for pickup times and service quality across all neighborhoods. We're creating mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees, and we're instituting a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination. She paused. I bought this company because I believe in the importance of reliable transportation for all communities, not just wealthy ones. I believe taxi service is a public trust, not a privilege for certain neighborhoods. And I will not own a company that discriminates against people who look like me or live in neighborhoods like mine. Greg Thompson gathered his belongings and left the conference room, escorted by security. The remaining managers sat in stunned silence. Marcus Chen took over, outlining the specific operational changes that would be implemented over the next 90 days. New dispatch protocols, customer service training, regular audits of service distribution across neighborhoods, community outreach to rebuild trust. After the meeting ended, Robert Santos, the fleet manager, approached Tasha. Miss Williams, I want you to know that some of us have been uncomfortable with how things were being run, but Greg had a lot of influence, and those of us in lower positions didn't feel we could challenge him. Then the culture was wrong, Tasha said. Moving forward, I expect every employee to speak up when they see discrimination or unethical behavior. I expect managers to listen when frontline employees raise concerns, and I expect leadership to act on problems rather than protect problem employees. Over the next week, Tasha personally reached out to every customer who had filed a discrimination complaint. She apologized, explained the changes being implemented, and offered free rides and account credits. Some accepted graciously, others were skeptical, wanting to see if the changes were real or just PR. The story of Tasha's experience and Metro Cab's reforms made local news. Tech CEO discovers discrimination at her own taxi company became a headline that sparked broader conversations about transportation equity in San Francisco. Some commentators praised Tasha's swift action. Others criticized her for not having better oversight of the company before the acquisition. A few suggested that her experience demonstrated the pervasiveness of discrimination that successful black professionals still face daily. Tasha gave an interview to the San Francisco Chronicle explaining her reasoning. I could have just fired Greg Thompson and moved on, but the problem wasn't one dispatcher. It was a system that allowed discrimination to flourish. It was a culture where complaints were ignored. It was a failure of leadership at multiple levels. So we're fixing the system, not just removing one person. 3 months after the changes were implemented, Metro Cab's service metrics showed dramatic improvement. Average pickup times in the Tenderloin had decreased by 47%. Customer satisfaction scores in predominantly black and Latino neighborhoods had increased significantly, and complaints about discriminatory service had dropped to nearly zero. But the changes came with costs. 7 drivers quit, claiming the new dispatch system was unfair because they could no longer cherry-pick rides from affluent neighborhoods. 2 managers were terminated for resisting the reforms, and Metro Cab faced criticism from some competitors who suggested Tasha was being too political and that the old system was just business as usual. Tasha addressed these criticisms head-on. If business as usual means discriminating against people based on their race or address, then yes, we're changing business as usual. And if that makes us political, I'm comfortable with that. Our job is to provide transportation to everyone who needs it, not just to the customers who are easiest or most profitable. 6 months after the reforms, Metro Cab had become a model for equitable taxi service. The company was invited to present at transportation conferences. Other taxi companies and rideshare services reached out to learn about the dispatch system changes. And community organizations that had historically criticized taxi discrimination began partnering with Metro Cab on transportation access initiatives. But the most meaningful moment came 9 months after the initial incident. Tasha was in the Tenderloin, walking to a community meeting about transportation access, when an elderly black woman approached her. "Are you the lady who owns Metro Cab now?" "Yes, ma'am, I am." The woman smiled, tears in her eyes.
I just wanted to thank you. I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years, and for 40 years I've had trouble getting cabs to pick me up. I've been passed by, refused service, treated like I didn't deserve transportation. But last week, I called Metro Cab, and the driver was polite, showed up on time, and treated me with respect. It seems like such a small thing, but it meant the world to me. Tasha hugged the woman, her own eyes filling with tears. That's exactly why we made these changes. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves service. No exceptions. That encounter reminded Tasha why the work mattered. It wasn't just about running a profitable business, though Metro Cab was indeed becoming more profitable as service improved. It was about using her position as an owner to create equity, to demand accountability, and to prove that doing the right thing and doing good business weren't mutually exclusive. A year after the acquisition, Tasha stood at a press conference announcing Metro Cab's expansion into Oakland and San Jose, bringing the reformed service model to new communities. Reporters asked about her vision for the company. When I bought Metro Cab, I didn't know I'd be refused service by my own dispatcher on day one, Tasha said. But that experience gave me clarity about what needed to change. It showed me that discrimination in transportation isn't just wrong morally, it's bad business. When you refuse to serve entire neighborhoods, you're leaving money on the table. When you treat customers poorly, they find alternatives. When you allow discrimination, you create legal liability and reputational damage. She paused, looking directly at the cameras, but more than that, transportation is a fundamental necessity. People need reliable rides to get to work, to medical appointments, to family obligations. When taxi companies discriminate, they're not just being rude, they're creating barriers that affect people's economic opportunities and quality of life. A reporter asked, "What happened to Greg Thompson, the dispatcher, who refused you service?" "He was terminated, as he should have been. His actions violated company policy, civil rights law, and basic human decency. I don't take pleasure in anyone losing their job, but I also won't tolerate discrimination in any business I own. Has he tried to contact you or apologize?" Tasha shook her head. "No, and honestly, I'm not waiting for his apology. What matters is that the system has changed, so his replacement can't do what he did, that future customers won't face what I faced. That's the real measure of progress." 2 years after the incident, Metro Cab had doubled its customer base and increased revenue by 43%. The company had become the preferred taxi service for many San Francisco residents, particularly in communities that had historically been underserved. Greg Thompson had found work as a dispatcher for a smaller taxi company in a suburb east of San Francisco. According to mutual acquaintances, he still claimed he'd done nothing wrong, that he'd been unfairly targeted, that Tasha had set him up by not revealing her ownership. Tasha heard these reports and felt no anger, just a sort of tired resignation. Some people never learned. Some people never accepted responsibility for their actions. That wasn't her concern anymore. What mattered was that Metro Cab was now a company she was proud to own, a company that served all communities equitably, a company where discrimination wasn't tolerated at any level, a company that proved you could be successful while being ethical. And every time Tasha called for a Metro Cab from the corner of Eddy and Jones, and the driver showed up promptly, treated her with respect, and took her where she needed to go, she was reminded why the hard work of reform had been worth it, because transportation equity wasn't just a social justice issue. It was about dignity, opportunity, and the fundamental right of all people to move through the world without being judged by the color of their skin or the address where they lived. That was worth fighting for. That was worth owning a taxi company for. And that was the legacy Tasha intended to build.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.